Hi, I'm Nate Stewart, author of Not Ashamed of My Brain, The Mental Health Journey of a Person of Faith. About 12, 13 years ago, my life was at a low like I had never experienced before. My marriage was falling apart, I was working at a job that I hated, and basically I checked out emotionally. Then one night I was attending a prayer meeting at my church, and someone there read a Bible verse and then shared a word of encouragement that was spoken, and God used that as a way for me to understand what was going on in my life at the time, that I was in a pit and I didn't even know it. That night I felt something give. Now, my depression didn't go away. My diagnoses that I had had there for years was still there. I didn't get physically healed. But I was able to see for the first time that night just what I was in, not just with that pit, but knowing that while I was in that pit, God was actually in there with me. He was beside me the entire time. Now that night I was a mess. I was crying, I was shaking, I was feeling super embarrassed for falling apart in a crowded room like that. But I had taken a step I desperately needed to take. Now, on the car ride home, my wife asked me, she said, "Did God say anything to you in that moment?" And I told her, I said, "I'm supposed to write a book." I was not a writer by any stretch of the imagination at that time, and it made absolutely no sense. But I knew what I knew. What I didn't know was how I was going to do it. So over the years, I have started, stopped dozens of times. And eventually I started thinking maybe I heard wrong, that maybe I didn't understand what God had told me. But I continued to share my story with people. And hearing from them that they too struggle with their mental health just like I did, I realized that over the last decade now, this has been a decade of learning for me. I needed practice in my writing. I needed to have a clear vision of what I was going to be doing. Then came the summer of 2018. Now, I knew it was time to really dig in, and before I could even get into the first page, someone came into my life. God put them into my life to share with me that God had given them a message to share with me. It was time to write. Now, this woman had no idea that I was writing a book. She just knew what God had told her to say, or she just knew what God had told her to say, that it was time to write. And that was the gasoline I needed to fuel the fire. Now, a little over a year later, after many edits and then more edits, after figuring out what the publishing process even looks like, and mostly doing it wrong, learning by mistake, but look, it was hard, but it was totally worth it. And honestly, I couldn't be more proud of the end result, and I consider it an honor to be able to share it with you. Not Ashamed of My Brain, The Mental Health Journey of a Person of Faith, follows my life, the progression of my mental health struggles, and the positive and negative impact on my faith, or of my faith on my story. In these pages, or in the pages of this book, I have some pretty personal stories that I share, encompassing everything from my childhood, some of the secrets I hadn't shared with anybody before writing them in this book, and stories about my suicide attempts, my substance abuse issues. I also share some of the things the church has done well, and some of the things that the church has done that were not so good. Not Ashamed of My Brain is meant to be used as a way to begin the conversation around mental health, the church, and what faith-based support really means. It's intentionally short. It's laid out in such a way to bring about conversation. I have reflection questions that I've added at the end of each chapter. There are questions that can also be used independently as a way to understand ourselves and the people in our lives a little more fully. So whether you're in a small group in your church or alone in a coffee shop, it is my prayer that God would speak to you through those pages and do something extraordinary in your life. And always remember that there is never a reason for us to be ashamed of our brains.